Ben, so thank you so much for joining us. Tell us, who are you? Where are you from and where are you based now?
Yeah, so I'm Ben. I'm 47 from Toronto, Canada. I feel like it's like a dating website or something.
I was just about to say, this sounds like your Tinder profile.
Yeah, luckily I missed out on all that fun. I guess.
Married, 2 kids.
Yeah, Aaron, 2 kids, came over here for my wife's work. Came over in early 2022, just as COVID was kind of wrapping up. And so we were in a service apartment for a few months, and then we ended up in a condo here on River Valley. It's been good, challenge. Back home in Toronto, we would walk the kids to school. Here they take a bus, and Erin was pretty busy with her work, and I had more or less a lot of free time, and probably not the best thing for somebody to have that much free time. And I'm not someone who's out visiting museums and galleries and sightseeing all day. So yeah, it's been good. I'm glad we did it. It's one of those once in a lifetime experiences. And we didn't think, we thought this kind of chapter was closed. It wasn't going to happen. And then the opportunity came along. So we're happy that it did.
I'm going to take you right back. So trailing spouse for 101 for Ben. Talk me through, when did you guys you've just said that you thought that this sort of chapter of moving abroad and being able to sort of do this sort of thing had closed. Did you guys actively seek out an overseas assignment for your wife to sort of take and to see what that opportunity would be? Or was this one of those spontaneous things that sort of fell in her lap and you guys were then like, okay, let's roll?
Yeah, more spontaneous. It came up and I could tell Erin was super excited. So, we kind of jumped on it. She's more adventurous. She's more of a traveler than I am. I'm a bit of a homebody. I miss hanging out with the boys and playing hockey and that kind of stuff. That pretty basic domestic life. And, but you can't explore new worlds without leaving shore. So, took the plunge and, glad that we did it.
So what were you doing for work before you left?
Yeah, so at the time I wasn't working, so there was no constraints there. It made the decision, I guess, that much easier.
Yeah. And so what was the sort of the arrangement or the plan that you guys sort of came up with? Is Erin's job for a set amount of time in Singapore, or is this sort of an open-ended arrangement for her to be working over here?
Yeah, so it's a 2-year contract. We're 1 year down, 1 year to go. And we probably should start having some discussions about what the future looks like.
Yeah, interesting. So with you arriving from, what time of the year was it? Was it freezing in Toronto when you left?
Yeah, it was late February, early March. So, not too bad. Erin and I were lucky enough to come on a look-see trip in February. We stayed at the Fullerton, which was nice. And again, that was my first time in Asia. So, great experience. When we came over, the company picked up the tab for business class. So, seeing the girls in business class, was interesting. Like my dad would be rolling over, I'm sure. I didn't fly business class until I got lucky enough to get an upgrade when I was in my 30s, I think,
Well, I'll tell you what, my husband's job was definitely nowhere near as a sweet treat like that. We have very much flown cattle class the whole time we've been moving around.
Yeah.
So good. And it's so funny watching like primary school age children sitting in business class. And I know I always give them a filthy look when I board the plane and say, what are children doing in those seats?
Yeah. Yeah. I guess there was an empty seat, and there was a newborn basically stretched out on this first business class seat. I said, okay.
This is how we roll now.
Yeah, it's only downhill for that baby from now on.
Yeah, 100%. So tell me then, what was even just the readjustment? I know that it's always such a huge headspace change, physically moving, and then physically moving to somewhere, a part of the world that you haven't even visited on holidays, let alone sort of even considered moving physically and picking up everything and coming over. How did you find those initial few months? Like you already mentioned that you were in a service department, so not even in your own place. So that's still an element of living out of a suitcase. But what were those first sort of few months like? Getting the kids sorted, getting Erin sorted into work? Like what did it sort of look like on your end?
Yeah, I mean, Erin did a lot of the heavy lifting. She has a lot more patience than I do, and she's much better at making sure that the I's and the T's are all crossed and dotted. But yeah, it was a bit challenging, and living in a service apartment, we didn't, have the stuff that we're used to, and it gets a bit cramped. The kitchen wasn't great, so we weren't cooking a lot. And as you know, it's not cheap here. So yeah, that was a bit tricky. And then you're just at the end of it, you're looking forward to just being in your own place. But to be fair, it wasn't all that bad. Things were well managed for the most part, so can't complain too much.
And so what did life look like, daily life look like in that sort of first sort of 6-12 months that you were here?
Yeah, get up around 6:30, 7, and then get the kids ready onto their school bus. And then Erin would either be working from home or going into the office. And then I would try and occupy my time, maybe go for a long walk, a workout, go explore some of the hawker stalls. Really nothing too crazy. It was fairly boring, doing a bit of reading, investing a little bit, just getting used to Singapore, but nothing crazy. I don't think we traveled outside of Singapore for the first bit. We kind of waited until we were landed into our apartment. So once that happened, we went off to Thailand and Bali once, and then Thailand again. And then now it's kind of like we feel there's a bit of a sense of urgency to see a bunch of countries that we haven't been to yet. So we feel the clock's ticking, but I think the plan is to stay, a little bit longer.
Yeah, interesting. So did you find that, like you said, you're not a museum or a gallery kind of guy, you weren't out sort of seeing the cultural sides of town. Were you able to sort of find that you found your people, or that you found a crowd, or that you were socializing at all?
Not really. We have some friends that we connected with. That actually one of them works with Erin, and I never met him before, but he's friends with friends of ours back home in Toronto. So we hung out, we still hang out, but that was really my only connection for the first while. And again, I guess a bit of an introvert. I feel like friendships should happen organically, and I wasn't really about going out to force it. And so it makes it tough. And I think it's also harder as you get a bit older. I'm not 25 anymore, so you're not as social as you used to be.
Yeah, it's interesting. Have you played any sport since you've been here?
Not really. Play a little bit of tennis. There's a tennis court in our back that I'll hit the ball around with somebody if they're around. I'm not very good, so I thought about bringing my hockey stuff, but just couldn't be arsed really because it's Singapore. But yeah, just, going out for walks, put the headphones in. I've been exploring a bunch of different wine shops. I'm a big wine fan. So, getting to know the different retailers. But yeah, overall, I would say like people would be disappointed with the amount that I've gotten out and done stuff, but I guess that's just sort of how I am, you know.
I don't think that that's disappointing at all. I sometimes find myself, I'm actually listening to you being quite envious of someone that can actually just lean into this and take it easier and things. I seem to have this horrific bullet gate attitude towards life at all times, and I exhaust myself most of the time. So I'm listening to you thinking this actually sounds like bliss.
Yeah. Well, don't get me wrong. I was torturing myself, beating myself up for not being, more productive and what have you. But yeah, at the same time, it's kind of like, well, this is life, and try and make the most of it while you're here, type of thing.
Yeah, 100%. So I believe that things are a little less cruisy these days because you sort of have made the transition that I know a lot of people, particularly based in Singapore, that had previously been on a dependent pass, so not being able to work and not being able to actually do things and access the workforce and those sorts of things. But you've landed a job.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So tell me, how did this all come about?
So I come from a bit of a logistics and machinery and industrial background, mainly in aviation, and kept in touch with a few people over the years. And one of the gentlemen I reached out to was looking for some support and some help in Singapore. And they're a fairly big organization, and they have the resources to sort of make these things happen. So yeah, it took a little while, but eventually we made it happen, and I started work about, I guess, March 27th, so not too long ago.
So tell me, what was that sort of transition like for you? Because you've been just living the good life, cruising around and being the primary caregiver and the stay-at-home dad and the provider of all things family support. What sort of happened now that, or what sort of prep, I guess, in getting ready for it? But then, what's that sort of looking like now as in the household?
Yeah, so yeah, it's a bit of a jolt to the system, not only for me but for the kids as well. But we've managed. We do have a helper, which is a godsend. I don't know how we'd survive without it. One of those things where the kids have play dates and none of the people live nearby. So, again, back home, everybody that the kids hung out with were doors away, and now we're fetching grabs and taking the MRT and stuff like that. So it's a bit of an adjustment, but we're lucky that way. But yeah, for myself, it was like getting the engine going again, having that structure. It's probably still taking its time to really kick in, but yeah, I'm happy that I found something.
Yeah, interesting. So you said that it took a while. How long, sort of, from the okay, all right, I'm done with lone walks in the park, to okay, I've got to get back into this? Sort of, how long did it take for the whole sort of process to go from go to woe to get it happening?
Yeah, so I was probably, there were some initial discussions at the end of 2022, and then having more substantial talks in early 2023. But I would say overall it was probably about 2 months.
I must say that is actually breakneck speed. I'm very impressed.
Yeah. Well, it's I was lucky to have befriended this person, and then again working for the company, they I guess they have enough resources to make these things happen. So there was back and forth. I had to do a medical and a bunch of other stuff, and so that seemed to take a while. I guess in my head maybe it felt longer, but yeah.
True. The days can be long, so it does all. It feels like a lot longer a lot of the time. I think sometimes, well, I'm going to call you on one thing. I do not believe that it was luck. I think very much good management, and I think that That's exhibit A of why it's so beneficial keeping your networks up, regardless of whether they're abroad or back in your home country or whatever, because the fact that you can, a friend of a friend or a connection through somewhere, I think that you're a perfect example of being able to leverage those networks to get something. So I'm going to call you on it being not luck, that's much better, good management.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure I've burned a few bridges over the years, but I kept some alive and well. So you never know. I mean, if you had told me 5 or 10 years ago that I'd be in Singapore, I would have said there's no way. Again, I'm more of a homebody, so if Erin was sort of waffling on the idea, I would have been indifferent and stayed back. But I know that it's something that she really wanted to do, and I was like, yeah, I should get out of my comfort zone. So here we are.
That's so good. So how have you, like, it retrospectively looking at it after sort of say a 12-month period, are you pleased that you made the move?
Yeah, definitely. Part of me still wants to hang on to North America and my previous life with friends and family. Just having those friends, it's hard to replicate them, just off the bat from being in a new place. But yeah, I'm glad we did it. Definitely felt lonely. There was definitely moments of depression, if you will. Just maybe too much time with your own head, and yeah, it wasn't easy. I probably could have done a few things to make it easier on myself, but made it through.
Well, that's a perfect segue. What sort of things do you wish that you'd known before you'd made the move, or before you said yes?
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's more or less what I expected. Erin and I lived in Vancouver, so on the west coast of Canada for 4 years. And I guess it was somewhat similar. Back then I was working, and we really didn't make any huge inroads into a network of friends there. So we were going back to Toronto quite a bit, a lot of people getting married. We probably could have gone to Hawaii 10 times. So it's somewhat similar.
If I can interrupt, in your defense there, my husband and I also lived in Vancouver and found exactly the same thing. And we are both mega extroverts that harassed anyone that we could talk to try and be friends with them, and they didn't want a bar of us.
Yeah, no, I don't know if it's a combination of us versus them, but I would go to the local bar where we lived near Kitsilano, and I would try and strike up a conversation with the bartender, and they weren't having it. I was like, this is very strange to me. And I think it is a beautiful place. I love visiting Vancouver still, but they're very entitled, and they think they invented the islands and the mountains and the ocean. So as people hate Toronto because it's like the New York of Canada, it's like where the financial system is and whatever. So people love to shit on Toronto, but Vancouver by far the worst people in Canada.
Public service announcement. Thanks, Ben.
Yeah. I'm not afraid to share that either.
So for any of
I understand why people don't like Torontonians. I get it. They get too much media attention. The sports teams get all the coverage in Toronto, but the people in Vancouver, they've got a chip on their shoulder, and no one hates Vancouver. Vancouver is a beautiful place. We don't sit around Toronto and dump on Vancouver. Everyone loves to visit Vancouver. So
hilarious. I interrupted you though. You were giving fabulous advice as to what you wish you'd known before you moved.
Right.
I rudely interrupted you.
I don't know. I think it's just, for me, I needed to be a bit more outgoing and a bit more of an extrovert, and maybe I need to pick up a few more hobbies, outside of just buying and drinking wine. So
especially if that's like 9 o'clock in the morning by yourself.
Yeah, I tried to avoid that. I think I did a pretty good job. But yeah, when you're not working, you're staying up late, you don't really have to worry about getting up early in the morning. So you're having a few glasses of wine, watching HBO till 2, 3 in the morning. So that's a bit of a guilty pleasure, I guess. But yeah, I should have probably joined a badminton league or I don't know, something.
Yeah, interesting. And I wonder if sometimes that getting your head into that headspace before you leave is also like a sort of a preemptive measure. Like I even just thinking it's not like relocating, but it's a similar-ish thing around my father going into retirement. And it took him 3 goes at retirement, I'll say that. But he was very aware that while he was still working, that he had no hobbies. And he was like, I'm going to have so much time on my hands that I need to get something happening. And so he actually started doing had some guitar lessons and some drawing lessons and things while he was still at work. And so that literal initial, I can't remember the word that you used, but that almost jolt was a little more subdued. And I wonder if that's sometimes for people that are before they've actually left to go and relocate somewhere else, that's actually something to really think about. And you can then at least hit the ground running. And that's at least one core thing that you can go and potentially meet people through or find people.
Yeah.
Did you guys have you guys joined any sort of the clubs? There's a very obviously big club scene in Asia. Has that been something that you guys have done as a family at all?
Yeah, we've talked about it. We just haven't gotten there yet. I think, we feel like we spend enough money as it is. So adding one more expense, and maybe it's worth it. I know some people like the American club or the British club or the Aussie club because it's stuff for the kids. And so, we haven't ruled that out, and it probably would help in certain ways. But yeah, for now, we've just decided to go it alone. Our friend here is a member at Mandela. So every now and then I'll hit Mandela with him, and he goes to smoke cigars mainly. I don't smoke cigars, so but it's fine.
I hear you on the just hemorrhaging money, and Singapore is great at like just taking your money for all the things.
Yeah.
Oh goodness. Well, I think listening to you, I hear so many similarities to other people that I've talked to like over these interviews. And I think that what's so interesting is that quite often when I ask like what advice that you would give or how you would do sort of things differently, it often feels like a bit of a pile on, and you're a bit like, oh God, I should have done this and I should have done that.
Yeah.
So I think that in itself can be a bit of a, like you put yourself then in a bit of a spiral on those sorts of things as well, when you're constantly thinking like, oh, I know I should do this, but like I'm so tired because I watch TV till 2:00 in the morning.
Yeah.
But I think that if you had one gold nugget of advice that you would give to someone that hasn't left yet and is or has maybe just relocated somewhere, and that they are an introvert. So I think that that's a really key part of my question to you is like, I've had lots of advice from people that have got no qualms going to networking things or signing up to a sport that maybe they've never played before or all of those sorts of things. But for someone who is far more introvert by nature, what would be sort of one bit of key advice that you think you would give?
Yeah. And I did read these, some of these questions beforehand, and I guess I never came up with a good answer. I feel like I probably didn't do a great job, so I'm not sure I'm the best person to ask. But yeah, I think, whatever your interests are back home, try and replicate it here as much as possible, whether that's reading or hiking or cycling or badminton or tennis. There's something here for everybody. If I wanted to, I could have played hockey, and in hindsight, maybe I should have brought my stuff over to give me something to do. I feel like I'm pretty good at killing a day as it is on my own. But after a while, it starts to wear on you, I guess, and you start to look for a bit more engagement. And, if people are working, then you're on your own, you're missing out. And there's, you can hit the bar, I guess, at noon, but that's going to get old and expensive really quick. So yeah, I think just maybe knowing yourself, if that's possible, before you come, and really delving into the things that you like to do, and just keep yourself busy. Not anything, it's more Captain Obvious type stuff, I guess, but yeah, just to keep yourself occupied so you don't go a little squirrely. Because I do know, I've talked to other people that, yeah, they do get a bit lonely and bored, and maybe slightly depressed because they're not doing something, or they feel like they should be doing something more.
And those walls start closing in.
Yeah, I mean, Singapore's great. We're very lucky. As they say, it's Asia light. The people have been pretty friendly. The food's great. It's safe. It's clean. So, can't complain too much. I think, I blame myself for not being a bit more aggressive and ambitious to get out there, but that's kind of, I guess, just the way I am.
And I think as well that like that self-awareness enough that if that's not you, it's so disingenuous, like going and trying to be that person, because that's then an exhausting like fast to keep up if that's not you, and then you meet people under the impression that that's what you're like. That is an exhausting way to do life. So I think that actually being, like you said, knowing yourself and really taking that into consideration with what you're doing with your time, I think that that's a really, really sensible way of doing it. I think all the things you've talked about, Ben, will ring true for a lot of people, because I think there's often this feeling of like you touched on it a couple of times. You said, like, I can't complain, but the thing is that it is all relative. And sometimes that even when you live in a beautiful place and the weather is literally sunshine every day and the food's amazing and everything's so accessible and it's all right here, that just adds this other layer of sort of guilt around almost resenting it or feeling uncomfortable, or why aren't I loving this? And I think that that's a really interesting I think that that's just a really interesting thing that is not flagged when people are moving somewhere else. It's that everyone that you left at home thinks you're having this amazing adventure that's happening all the time and all these incredible things that you're doing. And like you said, Asia at your doorstep. And then you're like, yeah, but there's reality. There's kids' school, and there is the job that we came for with your spouse, and that there's all these things of reality that you sort of forget that when you're leaving. And I think that can be a real shock to the system for people. So I think you've really articulated that beautifully. So thank you. Yeah,
I think before we came, we had friends that went on assignment, and I did think, oh, they're off having the best of times, and didn't really give it any thought, just assumed that they were having the best life, right? And maybe they were, I don't know, but I definitely have a different perspective now, having done it.
Yeah. And it's really interesting, the perspective on the working partner. I think that quite often we've had a lot of conversations in our household of when there's that element of my husband goes to work and he's the job and he's the reason that we're here, and all of those things that he's sort of like, oh, well, it's unfair. You get to be out there playing tennis and lolling around in bed and getting to walk, and you don't have any of these responsibility. And at the same time, like, there's almost this, you've got this resentment towards each other because they've got the purpose of going to work every day and meeting people at work and that structure to their day, and they're on the flip side envious of your what appears to be a really sort of cruisy day. So it makes the household relationships, like, it's a challenging dynamic that I've definitely experienced.
Yeah, for sure. And I think one of the things we touched on when we first met, you had said that, you know, you wanted to get more men on the show. And, you know, I think we touched on ego and things like that. So, you know, for me, and maybe it's just me, but I don't really have much of an ego. So for me to come along with Erin and support her work, it was, you know, it was no big deal. We're glad we did it, and yeah, I fully support what she's doing, and you know, I know she would do the same for me if something better came along. So yeah, yeah, no big deal.
Look out, you might be doing some thing in like some outrageously, I don't know, out there place that some amazing dream job comes for you. And then I hear Erin and she's like, oh gosh, he had it so easy. I now live in like Vladivostok or somewhere cold and freezing, and
Yeah,
and she's not working anymore.
yeah. I don't know if she'll go along with that, but you know, we'll see.
Well, you've done your time now, Ben. So next trip is yours.
That's it. Yeah.
Well, look, I really appreciate your time, and thank you so much for sharing your story with us.